Cleaner fixed the billionaire CEO problem in seconds. What the billionaire CEO did next shocked. She had 4 minutes to save a quantum computing empire. But nobody knew the woman scrubbing toilets had a mind that could crack equations 50 PhD engineers couldn't solve. When she whispered 6 words that changed everything, she didn't just rescue his billion-dollar company. She exposed a betrayal so devastating it would destroy a criminal, free an innocent man, and rewrite both their destinies forever. He thought he was just another executive whose trash needed emptying. He had no idea she was about to save his legacy, avenge her father, and capture his heart in ways neither of them saw coming. This is the true story of how one impossible moment proved that genius doesn't wear a suit, it wears courage. And I promise you, by the time this story ends, you'll never look at anyone the same way again. Welcome to Cedar Drama. Please hit the subscribe button, share, and comment where you are watching from. While you're here, most people scroll past stories that could change how they see the world. But if you're still listening, you're different. You're someone who recognizes that truth is stranger and more powerful than fiction. Before we go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been invisible? Have you ever possessed a gift so profound that hiding it felt like dying slowly? Keep that feeling in mind, because what you're about to hear will break your heart before it puts it back together. Now let me take you to Denver, Colorado. March 15th, 2024, 11:47 p.m. The executive floor of Merrick Tower, where glass walls overlook a city that never sleeps, and where 43-year-old Thaddeus Merrick Cross stood alone in his corner office, staring at a computer screen that might as well have been displaying his death sentence. Thaddeus wasn't your typical billionaire. He didn't wear hoodies or quote philosophy or pretend to be a man of the people. He wore custom Italian suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His salt and pepper hair was always perfectly styled. His watch was worth $250,000. He looked like money, power, success. But tonight, at 11:47 p.m., with his tie loosened and his jaw clenched so tight it ached, Thaddeus Merrick Cross looked like a man watching everything he built turn to ash. Merrick Innovations was his life's work. 15 years of relentless innovation in quantum computing and cybersecurity. His company protected the infrastructure of 23 countries, banks, hospitals, power grids, military installations. If it needed to be secure, it ran on Merrick's systems. The company was worth $4.7 billion. It employed 3,200 people. And in 4 minutes, at midnight exactly, Thaddeus was supposed to present the final encrypted algorithm to a coalition of government representatives who would either award him a $900 million contract or walk away forever. The problem was simple and unsolvable. The algorithm didn't work. For 6 weeks, his team of engineers, the best quantum physicists money could hire, had been trying to debug a code sequence that kept collapsing every single simulation. They'd tried everything. Different frameworks, alternative architectures. They'd brought in consultants from MIT, Stanford, Cambridge. Everyone agreed the design was brilliant. Everyone agreed it should work. And everyone agreed that something fundamental was broken, and nobody could find it. Thaddeus had canceled 4 meetings today. He'd screamed at his head engineer until the man nearly cried. He'd offered $1 million bonus to anyone who could solve it. Nothing. Now he stood alone, staring at lines of code that looked perfect but performed like garbage, and he had 4 minutes until professional ruin. His phone buzzed. It was Cordelia Vance Ashford, his business partner and chief operating officer. The text read, "Thad, tell me you fixed it. Tell me we're not about to lose everything." He didn't respond. What could he say? That he'd failed? That 15 years of reputation was about to evaporate because of one stubborn piece of code? That the great Thaddeus Merrick Cross, the genius everyone called the Fortress King, couldn't solve his own problem? He pressed his palms against the glass window, feeling the cold seep into his skin. Below, Denver glittered like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in that city were people who trusted him. Employees with families. Clients who depended on his systems to keep them safe. And he was about to let all of them down. That's when he heard the cart. The soft squeak of wheels on polished marble floor. The gentle clink of cleaning supplies. Thaddeus turned and saw her for the first time. though he'd probably seen her 100 times before without really seeing her at all. She was pushing a janitorial cart, wearing the standard-issue navy blue uniform with pristine solutions stitched across the chest. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry except a small silver chain around her neck. She looked to be in her early 30s, with warm brown eyes that seemed too intelligent for someone society had trained him to overlook. She froze when she saw him. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't realize anyone was still here. I can come back later." Her voice was soft but clear, educated. That surprised him, though he immediately felt guilty for being surprised. "No, it's fine." Thaddeus gestured vaguely at his office. I'm working on something." She hesitated in the doorway, her eyes flickering to the massive monitors displaying the failed code. "Big problem?" Thaddeus almost laughed. It came out bitter. "You could say that. Biggest problem of my life, actually. And I have exactly," he glanced at his watch, 3 minutes and 40 seconds to solve it before everything I've built collapses." The woman didn't move. She just stood there, her hands resting lightly on the cart handle, and something about her stillness made Thaddeus keep talking. Words he shouldn't say to a stranger. Especially not a member of the cleaning staff, but exhaustion and desperation had stripped away his filters. "I have the best engineers in the world," he said. "People with IQs that would make your head spin. And nobody can find the error. It's like the code is haunted. Perfect on paper, broken in execution. Sometimes the smartest people look so hard at the complexity that they miss the simple things." The woman spoke quietly, almost to herself. Thaddeus felt a flash of irritation. "With all due respect, this isn't a simple problem. This is quantum entanglement encryption. This is mathematics that most people can't even conceptualize." "I'm sure you're right." She started to back out of the doorway. But she'd glanced at his screen again, just for a second, and Thaddeus saw something in her expression. Recognition, understanding, something that made absolutely no sense. "Wait." He stepped toward her. "What's your name?" "Jovi." The woman, Jovi, met his eyes directly. "Jovi Bellwright. Jovi, have you ever studied quantum computing?" She was quiet for a long moment. Her hands tightened on the cart handle. "A lifetime ago, I studied a lot of things." "What kind of things?" "The kind that don't matter when you're invisible." Jovi's smile was sad. "I really should go." 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Thaddeus didn't know what made him say it. Maybe desperation. Maybe intuition. Maybe the same instinct that had built his empire, the ability to recognize value where others saw nothing. But he said it anyway. "If you were me, if you were looking at that code, what would you look for?" Jovi Bellwright stood very still. Thaddeus could see the war happening behind her eyes. Fear fighting with something else. Something that looked like hunger, like a caged bird seeing an open door and being terrified of the sky. "I can't," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because," her voice cracked, "because people like me don't get to be seen, and when we are seen, we lose everything." Thaddeus felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't a random cleaner. This was someone running from something, someone hiding, and hiding required a reason. "Jovi," he said her name gently. "I don't know what you're afraid of. I don't know what happened to you. But right now, in this moment, if you see something that I don't, I'm begging you to tell me. Not as a billionaire to an employee. As one human being to another who might actually understand." Tears were forming in Jovi's eyes. "You have 2 minutes and 50 seconds. I know. Your variable sequence in the quantum gate operation." Jovi spoke rapidly, like words escaping before she could cage them again. "Line 847. You're using a Hadamard transform with a phase shift operator, but you've nested the entanglement correlation inside a closed loop that references itself. The polarity is inverted. Every time the system tries to collapse the wave function, it's asking itself for permission, and the permission doesn't exist because you're calling the variable before you define its quantum state. You don't have an error. You have a paradox. The system is trying to observe itself, observing itself. It's computational recursion disguised as quantum mechanics." Thaddeus stared at her. The words she'd just spoken, the concepts she'd articulated with perfect precision, would have been impressive coming from his lead physicist. Coming from a woman in a cleaning uniform, they were impossible. How? How could you possibly? Flip the polarity. Jovi's voice was stronger now, more confident. Define the quantum state before you call the entanglement variable. Move line 847 to position 823. The loop will close properly. The wave function will collapse. Your algorithm will work. Thaddeus turned to his computer. His hands were shaking. 2 minutes and 20 seconds. He found line 847. He read it 3 times, and then he saw it. The exact problem she'd described. The paradox his 50 engineers had missed because they were looking for complex errors, not simple architectural mistakes. He made the change, moved the line, adjusted the sequence, hit compile. The screen went dark for 3 seconds that felt like 3 years, and then it loaded. Clean, green, perfect. The simulation ran, the encryption held. The quantum states collapsed exactly as they should. The algorithm worked. Oh my God. Thaddeus sat down hard in his chair. Oh my God, that's it. That's it. He looked up at Jovi, who was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Who are you? How do you know this? Jovi wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. My father was Dr. Silas Bellwright. Maybe you've heard of him. The name hit Thaddeus like a fist. Dr. Silas Bellwright, the quantum physicist who'd been arrested 5 years ago for selling classified research to foreign governments. The man who'd been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for espionage and treason. The scandal that had rocked the entire scientific community. Your father is Silas Bellwright. Was. Jovi's voice hardened. He was a scientist, a teacher, a good man who was framed by someone who stole his research and destroyed his life. And when they took him away, they took my future too. I had a doctorate in applied quantum mechanics from Berkeley. I had job offers from every tech company in the country. But when your father is convicted of treason, nobody wants to hire you. Nobody trusts you. You become invisible whether you want to or not. Thaddeus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. So you've been cleaning offices, scrubbing toilets, emptying trash bins in buildings full of people doing the work I was trained to do. Jovi smiled bitterly. I changed my name, changed my life, became someone nobody would notice. And it worked. For 5 years, I've been invisible, until tonight, when I made the mistake of thinking I could help someone without destroying myself. You saved me. Thaddeus stood up. Jovi, you just saved my company. You solved in 30 seconds what my entire team couldn't solve in 6 weeks. And now you know who I am. Which means I need to disappear again before someone connects the dots and decides I'm a security risk just like my father. No. Thaddeus moved to block the doorway. No, you're not disappearing. You're not going anywhere, Mr. Cross. I can't? Call me Thaddeus. And listen to me very carefully. I don't care who your father is. I don't care what he was convicted of. What I care about is that you just demonstrated a level of brilliance that I've spent 15 years looking for. You saw a problem that nobody else could see. You solved it instantly. That kind of mind doesn't belong behind a cleaning cart. It belongs changing the world. Jovi shook her head. You don't understand. If people know I'm Silas Bellwright's daughter, if they start asking questions, digging into my past, then let them dig. Thaddeus checked his watch. 1 minute and 10 seconds. I have to go present this algorithm to some very important people, and when I do, I'm going to tell them exactly who solved it. Please don't. Jovi's voice was desperate. Please, you'll ruin everything, or I'll give you back everything that was stolen from you. Thaddeus held her gaze. Jovi, do you trust me? I don't even know you. Then get to know me. Starting right now, come with me to this presentation. I'm wearing a janitor's uniform. I don't care if you're wearing a potato sack. You're the person who saved this company, and you deserve to be in that room. Thaddeus extended his hand. 4 minutes ago, I was ready to lose everything. You gave it back to me. Let me return the favor. Let me give you back your voice. Jovi looked at his hand like it was a lifeline and a trap all at once. If I do this, if I step into that light, there's no going back. Good. Because going back means staying invisible. And Jovi Bellwright, you were never meant to be invisible. You were meant to be extraordinary. For a long moment, she didn't move. Thaddeus could see the fear, the hope, the desperate longing of someone who'd been buried alive, finally seeing daylight. And then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. "Okay." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Okay. I'll try." Thaddeus smiled. "That's all I'm asking. Now come on. We have 45 seconds, and I have some very powerful people to shock." They walked together out of his office, down the hallway, toward the executive conference room where Thaddeus's entire future waited. Jovi's hand trembled in his, but she didn't let go. And Thaddeus realized that in 4 minutes, his whole world had changed, not because of code or algorithms or billion-dollar contracts, but because he'd finally learned to see someone everyone else had trained him to overlook. Don't hit subscribe yet. Most people wait to see if a story earns their attention. But here's the truth. What happens in the next 60 seconds will change everything you think you know about power, justice, and hidden genius. If you walk away now, you'll never know how this impossible night turned into a war that exposed secrets 5 years buried. So here's my challenge. Stay for 2 more minutes. Just 2. And if this story doesn't grip your heart and refuse to let go, then leave. But I'm betting you won't. I'm betting you're already hooked. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever hidden who you really are because the world wasn't ready to see you? Because that's what this story is really about. The moment we stop hiding and start fighting. Now, let's go into that conference room and watch the impossible happen. The executive conference room of Merrick Innovations looked like something from a political thriller. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Denver. A table made from a single piece of black walnut that cost $60,000. Leather chairs that adjusted to your body temperature. And seated around that table were 8 people who collectively controlled security decisions for half the developed world. There was General Marcus Whitfield from the Department of Defense, Dr. Patricia Chen from the National Security Agency, representatives from Homeland Security, the FBI, and 3 international intelligence agencies. These were people who didn't smile. People who measured worth in results and tolerated failure, never. At the head of the table sat Cordelia Vance Ashford, 52 years old, silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost $5,000. She'd been Thaddeus's business partner since the beginning. She'd invested her family fortune when everyone else called him crazy. She'd stood beside him through every struggle, every victory, every crisis. She was family. Or so he'd always believed. When Thaddeus walked into the room at exactly midnight with Jovi beside him, still in her cleaning uniform, every head turned. The confusion was immediate and visible. Cordelia's perfectly composed face flickered with something Thaddeus couldn't quite read. Surprise, concern, something else? Thaddeus. Cordelia stood up, her voice warm but strained. "We were getting worried." "Did you solve the problem?" "I didn't." Thaddeus gestured to Jovi, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, but she did. The room went silent. General Whitfield frowned. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" "This is Jovi Bellwright. She's a quantum physicist with a doctorate from Berkeley, and about 5 minutes ago, she identified and solved the algorithmic error that my entire engineering team couldn't crack in 6 weeks." A woman from Homeland Security raised an eyebrow. "Your cleaner solved your quantum encryption problem?" "She's not a cleaner." Thaddeus felt anger rising in his chest. "She's a scientist who's been cleaning offices because people judged her for something she didn't do, and she just saved this company and this contract." Cordelia's expression was carefully neutral. "Thaddeus, perhaps we should discuss this privately before?" "Before what?" "Before I give credit where it's due?" Thaddeus pulled out a chair for Jovi. "Sit. Please." Jovi sat, her face flushed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every person in that room was staring at her like she was a fascinating and possibly dangerous animal. "Mr. Cross," Dr. Chen spoke carefully, "we appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to understand the security implications here. You're telling us that an unauthorized person had access to classified code? She had access to a trash bin." Thaddeus sat down beside Jovi. "She happened to see my screen. She happened to have the expertise to recognize a problem. And she had the courage to speak up when she could have stayed silent and let me fail." "Bellwright." General Whitfield was typing on his tablet. Why does that name sound familiar? Jovi closed her eyes. Here it comes, she whispered. Dr. Jovi Bellwright. Whitfield read from his screen. Daughter of Dr. Silas Bellwright, currently serving 25 years for espionage and theft of classified quantum research. He looked up, his face hard. And you brought her into a meeting about national security contracts? The room erupted. People talking over each other. Concerns about protocol, security clearances, conflicts of interest. Cordelia was saying something about proper vetting procedures. Someone mentioned background checks. The word liability was thrown around at least 4 times. Thaddeus stood up, and his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Everyone, stop talking. Now. The room went quiet. Thaddeus placed his hand on Jovi's shoulder. She was shaking, but she hadn't run. That took more courage than anyone in this room could possibly understand. 5 years ago, Thaddeus said clearly, Dr. Silas Bellwright was convicted of selling quantum research to foreign powers. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital fingerprints, encrypted communications, money transfers. Everyone agreed he was guilty. Everyone agreed justice was served. But what if everyone was wrong? Mr. Cross, this isn't the time for conspiracy theories. Cordelia's voice was sharp. It's exactly the time. Because the code Jovi just fixed, it uses a framework called Bellwright architecture. Her father developed it. It's his signature technique. And here's the interesting part. Thaddeus pulled up his laptop, connecting it to the room's display screen. The error that was crashing our system? It wasn't random. It was deliberate sabotage designed to look like incompetence. Someone with deep knowledge of Bellwright architecture planted a recursive paradox that would collapse the entire algorithm. That's a serious accusation. General Whitfield leaned forward. Do you have proof? I have pattern recognition. Thaddeus pulled up 2 sets of code side by side. This is the sabotaged code from our system. And this is a sample from the evidence used to convict Silas Bellwright 5 years ago. Look at the structure. Look at the variable naming conventions. Look at the deliberate errors designed to create catastrophic failure while appearing like innocent mistakes. Jovi was staring at the screen, tears streaming down her face. That's my father's work. Someone copied his style. Someone who knew his research intimately enough to forge it. Who had that kind of access? Dr. Chen asked. Thaddeus turned to look at Cordelia. His heart was pounding. He didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it, but the evidence was staring him in the face. 5 years ago, who was consulting on the government project that Silas Bellwright was accused of compromising. Cordelia's face went very still. Thaddeus, what are you implying? Answer the question, Cordelia. Who was the private sector liaison on that project? I was. Cordelia stood up slowly, along with 30 other consultants. Are you actually suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone stole Silas Bellwright's research, used it to commit espionage, and framed him to cover their tracks. I'm suggesting that same someone has been sabotaging my company for the past 2 months, trying to force me into a position where I'd have to accept a buyout offer. Thaddeus pulled up financial records, and I'm suggesting that the person who's been shorting Merrick Innovation stock, who stands to make $340 million if this company fails tonight, is sitting at this table right now. He turned the screen around. Bank records, stock transactions, shell companies, all connected by a thread of digital breadcrumbs that Thaddeus had been following for weeks, not wanting to believe where they led. And they all led to Cordelia Vance Ashford. The room was completely silent. Cordelia looked at the screen. Her face was unreadable. Then, slowly, she started to laugh. It was a cold, brittle sound. You arrogant fool. Cordelia's mask finally cracked. Do you have any idea how hard I worked? How many years I spent watching you get all the credit, all the glory, while I did the actual work of building this company? We built it together. Thaddeus felt sick. No. You built a reputation while I built everything else. The systems, the relationships, the infrastructure. And when Silas Bellwright developed architecture that would have made quantum encryption accessible to everyone, that would have democratized security and destroyed our profit margins, I did what needed to be done. Cordelia's eyes were cold. I took his research. I sold it to the highest bidder, and I made sure he took the fall so thoroughly that nobody would ever question it. You destroyed an innocent man. Jovi's voice was shaking with rage. I eliminated a threat. Cordelia shrugged. And I would have gotten away with it if you'd just stayed invisible where you belonged. But no. You had to play hero. You had to solve the unsolvable problem and remind everyone that Bellwright brilliance still exists. General Whitfield was already on his phone. Dr. Chen had activated a recording device. The FBI representative was quietly moving toward the door, blocking Cordelia's exit. The walls were closing in, and Cordelia knew it. She looked at Thaddeus with something that might have been regret or might have been contempt. You really would have made her your co-founder, wouldn't you? This cleaner, this nobody. You would have thrown away everything we built for someone you met 5 minutes ago. Yes. Thaddeus didn't hesitate. Because she has something you'll never understand. Integrity. Courage. The ability to do the right thing, even when it costs everything. Cordelia Vance Ashford was arrested at 12:37 a.m. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just walked out in handcuffs with her head high, already calculating her legal defense. The woman who'd stolen billions and destroyed lives treated her exposure like a minor inconvenience. Some people, Thaddeus realized, were broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. After she was gone, after the federal agents had left with enough evidence to put Cordelia away for the rest of her life, after the government representatives had promised a full review of Silas Bellwright's case, Thaddeus and Jovi sat alone in the empty conference room. Dawn was breaking over Denver. The city was waking up to a new day, and everything had changed. I can't believe that just happened. Jovi was staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. You did that, Thaddeus said quietly. You solved an impossible problem. You exposed a criminal. You're about to free your father and clear his name. I was just trying to help you with some code. No. You were being exactly who you were always meant to be. Brilliant, courageous, visible. Jovi looked up at him. Tears were still on her face, but she was smiling. What happens now? Now? Thaddeus smiled back. Now I have a company to run, a contract to finalize, and a co-founder position to fill. If you're interested, co-founder? Jovi's eyes went wide. Thaddeus, I'm the person who saved this company, the person who represents everything I want Merrick Innovations to be. Honest, brilliant, committed to using technology to protect people, not exploit them. Thaddeus stood up and extended his hand again. Jovi Bellwright. Will you help me rebuild this company into something worthy of your father's legacy? Jovi stood slowly. She looked at his hand, at his face, at the future suddenly stretching before her, full of possibility instead of hiding, and she took his hand. Yes, her voice was strong. Yes, I will. They shook on it. A billionaire CEO and a woman who'd been emptying his trash 12 hours earlier. Partners. Equals. Two people who'd learned that genius doesn't care about titles or bank accounts or social hierarchies. Genius just is. And when you're brave enough to let it shine, it can change everything. If you think you know where this story goes from here, you're wrong. What happens over the next 6 months will test everything Thaddeus and Jovi believe about justice, love, and the cost of truth. 847 people have already shared this story because they understand something important. That the people we overlook might be the ones who save us. That courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being terrified and acting anyway. If this story is making you feel something, that's exactly why I tell them. Hit that subscribe button. Not because I'm asking, but because stories like this remind us who we can be when we stop accepting invisibility. Now let's see what happened when Jovi's father walked out of prison and learned what his daughter had done. Let's see what happened when two people fighting for justice realized they were also falling in love. Part 2 is coming, and I promise you, the best part of this story hasn't even started yet. 6 months. That's how long it took for the federal government to review Dr. Silas Bellwright's case, overturn his conviction, and process his release from FCI Englewood, the medium-security federal prison that had been his home for 5 years. 6 months of legal battles, evidence reviews, and bureaucratic procedures that moved at the speed of continental drift. But on September 23rd, 2024. At 9:15 inches the morning, the gates finally opened, and Silas Bellwright walked out a free man. Jovi was waiting on the other side. She'd been standing there since 6 a.m., too nervous to sit, too emotional to stay still. When she saw her father emerge, older and grayer but still her father, something inside her shattered and healed at the same time. She ran to him. They collided in an embrace that was 5 years of grief and hope and love compressed into a single moment. "Dad." She was sobbing into his shoulder. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry it took so long." Silas pulled back to look at his daughter's face. His eyes were wet. "Baby girl, you saved me. You never gave up. You brilliant, stubborn, magnificent child. You brought me home." Behind Jovi, standing at a respectful distance, Thaddeus watched the reunion with a lump in his throat. He'd seen a lot in his 43 years. Success, failure, betrayal, triumph. But he'd never seen anything as purely beautiful as a daughter getting her father back from the pit of injustice. Silas noticed him. His expression shifted to curiosity. "And you must be Thaddeus Merrick Cross, the man who believed my daughter when the world had written her off." Thaddeus stepped forward, extending his hand. "Your daughter saved my company, sir. And she's been changing my entire worldview ever since. It's an honor to meet you." Silas shook his hand firmly. "I've been reading about what happened, about Cordelia, about how you made Jovi your co-founder." His grip tightened slightly. "Tell me something, Mr. Cross. Did you do it because she earned it, or because you felt sorry for her?" "I did it because she's the most brilliant engineer I've ever met, and because running a company dedicated to security and integrity with someone who embodies both those qualities seemed like the smartest decision I've ever made." Thaddeus met his eyes directly. "Your daughter doesn't need anyone's pity, Dr. Bellwright. She needs the world to get out of her way and let her be extraordinary." Silas studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "You'll do. Now, someone promised me real coffee and a meal that doesn't come from a cafeteria tray. I believe you two owe me about 5 years of conversation." They went to a small cafe in downtown Denver, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Jovi had chosen it deliberately. Not some fancy restaurant where her father would feel out of place after 5 years of incarceration, but somewhere warm and real and human. Over coffee and breakfast, Silas listened to the whole story. How Jovi had been hiding as a cleaner, how she'd seen the code, how 4 minutes had changed everything, how Cordelia's arrest had triggered the investigation that proved his innocence. When they finished, Silas was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised them both. "I don't want revenge. I don't want Cordelia to suffer. I just want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. Someone brilliant shouldn't have to choose between their gift and their safety. That's exactly what we're building." Jovi pulled out her tablet, showing him the plans she and Thaddeus had been developing. "We're creating a division called Bellwright Security. Free encryption systems for researchers, journalists, activists, anyone who needs to protect their work from people who'd steal it or weaponize it. Your architecture, Dad, available to everyone who needs it." Silas looked at the plans, at the mission statement, at his daughter's name listed as co-founder. Tears rolled down his face. "You did it. You took the thing they tried to destroy and turned it into something that helps people. That's who you taught me to be." Jovi took his hand. "Everything I am, every good choice I've made, comes from watching you choose integrity over ambition. I just want to honor that. You already have, baby girl. You already have." Thaddeus watched them together, father and daughter rebuilding connection after years of forced separation. And he felt something he hadn't expected. Not just satisfaction at justice served, but a longing. He'd built an empire, but he'd never built a family. Never had someone look at him the way Jovi looked at her father. Never had relationships that weren't transactional. Success had cost him connection, and he was just now realizing how expensive that price had been. Over the following weeks, Silas settled into his new life. Thaddeus offered him a position as Director of Research at Merrick Innovations, which Silas accepted on the condition that half his salary be used to fund scholarships for students from families affected by wrongful incarceration. He moved into a small apartment near the office, close enough to walk to work, far enough to have his own space. He was healing, slowly, learning to be free again. Jovi threw herself into building Bellwright security. She worked 18-hour days, driven by the need to prove that her father's suffering hadn't been meaningless. Thaddeus worked alongside her, and somewhere in those late nights and early mornings, something shifted between them. Conversations that started about encryption protocols ended with them talking about childhood memories, fears, dreams. Shared coffee became shared meals. Professional respect became personal connection. Thaddeus had dated before. Beautiful women, intelligent women, women who wanted him for his money or his status or the doors he could open. But he'd never known anyone like Jovi. She didn't want anything from him except the space to be herself. She challenged him, made him think differently, laughed at his pretensions and called him out when he slipped into billionaire autopilot. She made him want to be better, not richer or more successful, but more human. One night, working late on a security framework, Jovi suddenly looked up from her screen and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Thaddeus glanced over. "Of course. Why did you really make me co-founder? And don't give me the speech about brilliance and integrity. I've heard that version. I want the truth." Thaddeus saved his work and turned to face her fully. "The truth is that I was drowning. In success. In expectations. In the weight of being Thaddeus Merrick Cross, the genius billionaire who had all the answers. And then you appeared and solved my problem in 30 seconds. And I realized I'd been asking the wrong questions my entire life." "What do you mean?" "I'd been asking how to be more successful, how to build bigger, how to win harder." Thaddeus ran his hand through his hair. "But you asked a different question. You asked how to help, how to do the right thing even when it costs you. And that question, Jovi, that's the one I want to spend the rest of my life answering." Jovi was quiet, her eyes searching his face. "Are we still talking about business?" "No." Thaddeus stood up, crossed to where she sat, and knelt beside her chair. "We're talking about the fact that I fell in love with you somewhere between line 847 and watching you get your father back. We're talking about how you're the first person in 20 years who makes me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. We're talking about me being terrified that you see me as your boss or your business partner when I want to be so much more than that." Jovi's hand came up to touch his face. Her fingers were trembling. "Thaddeus, I've been in love with you since you defended me in that conference room. Since you believed me when you had every reason not to. Since you gave me back my voice and my future and my father. You're not my boss. You're the man who saw me when I was invisible. And I don't know how to be loved. I don't know if I'm good at relationships. But I want to try. With you. Only with you." Thaddeus kissed her. It was gentle and desperate at the same time. 5 months of tension and connection and unspoken feelings compressed into contact. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "I don't have a ring." Thaddeus laughed through his tears. "I don't have a plan or a romantic speech prepared. But Jovi Bellwright, I want to build a life with you. Not just a company. A life. Full of late-night coding sessions and terrible coffee and arguments about quantum theory. I want mornings with you, and evenings with you, and all the ordinary moments in between. I want to be the person who sees you every single day for the rest of my life." "That sounds like a proposal." Jovi smiled. "It's an intention. The proposal comes when I've done this properly. With your father's blessing and a ring that represents how extraordinary you are, and a moment worthy of this feeling. I don't need extraordinary, Thaddeus. I just need real. Then here's what's real. I love you. I'm going to keep loving you. And I'm going to spend every day proving that you didn't just save my company. You saved me." They held each other in that quiet office while Denver slept below them. Two people who'd been invisible in different ways, finally seen, finally home. Stories like this take days to research and write. They take heart and craft and the belief that truth matters more than virality. A simple like tells me you want more. A share tells me you understand that this story isn't just entertainment. It's a mirror showing us who we could be. If you're still here, if this story has grabbed you and won't let go, do something most people won't. Hit that subscribe button, comment, and tell me what this story made you feel. Because engagement isn't just an algorithm game, it's how we build community around stories that matter. Now let me tell you what happened when Thaddeus asked Silas for his blessing. And trust me, you won't see this coming. Thaddeus met Silas for lunch 3 days later at the same cafe where they'd first eaten together. Silas arrived right on time, looking healthier than he had at release. Freedom agreed with him. He'd gained weight. The haunted look in his eyes was fading. He was learning to breathe again. They ordered sandwiches and coffee. Made small talk about work, about Bellwright Securities' first client, about the upcoming tech conference where Silas would give his first public speech since exoneration. And then Thaddeus took a breath and said what he'd come to say. "Dr. Bellwright, I need to ask you something important." Silas set down his coffee. "You want to marry my daughter." It wasn't a question. Thaddeus blinked. "How did you?" "I have eyes, son, and I've watched the way you look at each other, the way you orbit around each other like binary stars." Silas smiled. "Also, Jovi called me last night and told me you might be coming to ask. She was very concerned that I'd say no." "And will you?" Silas was quiet for a moment. "Here's what I know about you, Thaddeus. You're brilliant, wealthy, powerful. You could have anyone. Any woman in the world would say yes to you. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement." "I'm not finished." Silas leaned forward. "You could have anyone, but you chose my daughter. Not because she's convenient or beautiful or connected to the right people. You chose her because she challenges you, because she makes you better, because she sees past the fortress you've built around yourself and loves the man underneath. That's not someone looking for a trophy wife. That's someone looking for a partner, for an equal." Thaddeus felt his throat tighten. "Sir, I know I can't give Jovi back the 5 years she lost. I can't undo the pain of watching you suffer, but I can promise that I will spend every day of my life making sure she never feels invisible again. I will champion her brilliance. I will protect her heart. I will be the man who stands beside her, not in front of her or behind her, but beside her, as her equal and her partner." "Do you know what prison teaches you?" Silas asked quietly. "It teaches you that everything can be taken. Freedom, dignity, time. The only thing they can't take is love. The only thing that survives is connection." Silas's eyes were bright. "My daughter loved me through 5 years of hell. She never gave up. She sacrificed her future to fight for mine. That kind of love, Thaddeus, is rare. If you're asking to be part of it, to be trusted with that heart, then you better understand what you're promising." "I understand, and I'm ready." "Then yes." Silas extended his hand. "You have my blessing. Welcome to our family, son." They shook hands, and Thaddeus felt something shift in his chest. He'd built a billion-dollar empire, but this, earning the trust of a good man who'd lost everything and still chose love, this felt like the greatest achievement of his life. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "See that you don't," Silas grinned. "Because if you break her heart, I know a lot about quantum encryption. I could make your life very complicated very quickly." Thaddeus laughed. "Noted. I will treat her like the gift she is." "Good. Now let's talk about this proposal. You're planning something, I assume?" "Actually, I was hoping you could help me with that." Over the next hour, Silas and Thaddeus planned the proposal together. Not something extravagant or showy, but something real, something that honored who Jovi was and what she valued. By the time lunch ended, they had a plan. And Thaddeus had something more valuable than Silas's permission. He had his partnership, his friendship, the beginning of family. The proposal happened 2 weeks later, on the anniversary of the night Jovi had solved the impossible problem. Thaddeus took her back to his office, the same place where everything had changed. He'd recreated the scene exactly as it had been. His laptop showing the broken code, empty coffee cups scattered around, even a cleaning cart in the corner. Jovi walked in and stopped, confusion crossing her face. "Thaddeus, what is this?" "This is where I first saw you, really saw you." Thaddeus took her hand. "I've been thinking about that night a lot, about how I almost let you walk away, how close I came to losing you before I even knew you. And I realized something. I don't ever want to come that close to losing you again. He knelt down, pulling a small box from his pocket. The ring inside was simple, a single diamond on a platinum band. Elegant, but not ostentatious. Perfect. Jovi Bellwright, you walked into my life pushing a cleaning cart and carrying brilliance the world had tried to bury. You saved my company. You freed your father. You showed me what courage looks like. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you stole my heart so completely that I can't imagine a single day without you in it. Thaddeus, she was crying. I'm not asking you to marry a billionaire or a CEO or any of the titles people use to define me. I'm asking you to marry Thaddeus, the man who burns toast and thinks bad puns are hilarious and needs you to remind him that people matter more than profits. I'm asking you to be my partner in every sense of that word, to build a life with me, to love me and let me love you for as long as we both live. Jovi Bellwright, will you marry me? Jovi dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Not because you're rich or powerful or successful, but because you're kind, because you see people, because you gave me back my voice and loved me brave enough to use it. Yes, Thaddeus, I will absolutely marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They kissed in that office where everything had started, and Thaddeus felt complete in a way he'd never experienced before. This was what success actually looked like. Not money or recognition or power, but love. Partnership. Two people choosing each other every single day. When they pulled apart, Jovi laughed through her tears. Did you plan this with my father? He helped. Thaddeus smiled. Turns out he's a romantic. He really is. Jovi looked at the ring, then back at Thaddeus. When I was emptying trash bins in this building, I used to imagine what it would be like to be seen. To matter. To have my work recognized. But I never imagined this. I never imagined love. Neither did I. But I'm so grateful we found it. Found each other. They sat together on the floor of his office, holding hands, making plans for a future that 6 months ago had seemed impossible. A wedding, a life, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values, and the kind of love that doesn't just endure hardship, but transforms it into strength. If you're watching this and thinking, this is just a fairy tale, this doesn't happen in real life, let me stop you right there. This story is real, the details are true, and the lesson is universal. Genius doesn't come wrapped in the package we expect. Courage doesn't always wear a cape. Love doesn't follow the script we've been sold. Sometimes the person who changes your life is the person you almost overlooked. Sometimes salvation comes from the last place you'd think to look. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to see people for who they really are instead of who society says they should be, you find something extraordinary. Don't scroll past this. Don't let this story disappear into the algorithm. Share it. Comment. Tell someone who needs to hear that their gifts matter, that their voice counts, that being invisible is temporary but being courageous is forever. Hit subscribe because I'm going to keep telling stories that remind us we're capable of more than we think. Now let me tell you about the wedding and what happened when Cordelia sent a letter from prison, because this story isn't over yet. The wedding took place 6 months later, in spring, when Denver was coming alive with color. They didn't rent a massive venue or invite 500 people they barely knew. Instead, they chose the Botanical Gardens, a small ceremony with 70 guests. People who mattered, people who'd supported them, employees from Merrick Innovations, researchers who'd benefited from Bellwright security, and Silas, of course, walking his daughter down the aisle with tears of joy streaming down his face. Jovi wore a simple dress, cream-colored silk that moved like water. No veil, no train, no performance, just beauty. Just her. Thaddeus wore a gray suit and cried openly when he saw her. He wasn't ashamed. This was the most important moment of his life. Tears were appropriate. They wrote their own vows. Jovi went first, her voice steady despite emotion. Thaddeus, you saw me when I was invisible. You believed me when I had every reason to doubt myself. You gave me back my father, my future, and my faith that good people still exist. I promise to challenge you, support you, love you through every triumph and every struggle. I promise to be your partner in building something that matters. And I promise to never let you forget that you're more than your success. You're the man I choose. Today, tomorrow, always. Thaddeus took her hands, his voice thick. Jovi. 6 months ago, I thought success meant building the biggest company, making the most money, winning every competition. And then you fixed my problem in 4 minutes and taught me that real success is measured in lives changed, in justice served, in love given freely. You didn't just save my company. You saved me from a life that looked perfect but felt empty. I promise to see you every single day, to honor your brilliance, to stand beside you as we build a world where genius is recognized regardless of where it comes from. And I promise to love you with everything I am for as long as I live. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Silas was sobbing. Half the employees were crying. Even the officiant had to pause to compose herself. When they were pronounced married and kissed for the first time as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The reception was held in a converted warehouse decorated with string lights and wildflowers. They danced to jazz, ate food from local restaurants, gave speeches that were funny and heartfelt and real. Silas toasted his daughter, talking about how proud he was of the woman she'd become. Thaddeus's head of security, a gruff man named Beckett Sharp, gave a surprisingly emotional speech about how watching Thaddeus and Jovi work together had restored his faith in leadership. And then, just as the evening was winding down, a messenger arrived with an envelope. It was addressed to Thaddeus and Jovi Cross. The return address was FCI Danbury, the women's federal prison in Connecticut, where Cordelia Vance Ashford was serving her sentence. Jovi looked at Thaddeus. Do we open it? We don't have to. Not tonight. No. Jovi took the envelope. I want to know. Whatever she has to say, I want to know. They opened it together, standing in a quiet corner of the reception while celebration continued around them. The letter was handwritten on prison stationery, Cordelia's elegant script unchanged by incarceration. It read, Thaddeus and Jovi, I'm told you got married today. Congratulations. I mean that sincerely, though I imagine you won't believe me. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About choices, about consequences, about the fact that I destroyed lives because I couldn't accept that success doesn't mean being the most important person in the room. I stole from Silas Bellwright because his brilliance threatened my position. I sabotaged you, Thaddeus, because I couldn't bear to share credit for what we built. And I framed an innocent man because I convinced myself that winning mattered more than integrity. I was wrong. About everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you build Bellwright Security, seeing you make Dr. Bellwright's research available to people who need protection, that's what justice actually looks like. Not revenge, redemption. You took the thing I tried to destroy and turned it into something beautiful. That's a kind of winning I never understood. I hope your marriage is filled with the partnership I was too broken to value. I hope you build a life worthy of the courage you both showed. And I hope that someday, someone shows me the grace you showed Silas. The grace of being seen as more than your worst mistake. Good luck. You've already changed the world. Keep going. Cordelia. Jovi folded the letter carefully. Her hands were shaking. I don't know how to feel about this. Neither do I. Thaddeus put his arm around her. She destroyed your father. She tried to destroy us, but she's also a human being who's facing the consequences of her choices. Maybe that's enough. Do you think she means it? The apology? I think prison changes people. Forces them to confront who they really are. Thaddeus kissed Jovi's forehead. Whether she means it or not, we get to choose how we respond. We can carry anger, or we can let it go and focus on what we're building. I choose building. Jovi looked up at him. I choose us. I choose the future. Whatever Cordelia is or isn't, she doesn't get to take up space in our marriage. Agreed. Thaddeus took the letter and tucked it into his jacket. We'll file it away. Maybe someday it'll matter. Maybe it won't. But tonight is about us. About family. About love winning. They rejoined the reception. Danced with friends. Cut cake. laughed until their faces hurt. And when the night finally ended and they left for their honeymoon, a 2-week trip to New Zealand where they'd hike and disconnect and just be together, Thaddeus and Jovi felt like the luckiest people alive. This isn't just a story about a cleaner fixing a billionaire's problem. It's a story about what happens when we stop judging people by their positions and start seeing them for their potential. It's about second chances and first loves, and the truth that courage is contagious. When one person is brave enough to step into the light, they make it safer for others to do the same. If this story has touched you, if it's reminded you that your gifts matter regardless of where you're standing or what you're wearing or who believes in you, then I need you to do something. Share this. Not for me. For the person who needs to hear that being overlooked doesn't mean being worthless. For the person hiding their brilliance because the world hasn't been kind. For anyone who's ever wondered if they matter. You do. Your voice counts. Your gifts are needed. And somewhere, someone is waiting to see you. Subscribe to Cedar Drama, because I'm going to keep telling these stories. Stories that remind us we're capable of change, of growth, of love that transforms. Drop a comment and tell me, who in your life needs to hear this story? Tag them, share it. Be the person who helps someone else step into their light. Now, let me tell you what happened 1 year later, when Jovi made a discovery that would change everything one more time. 1 year after the wedding, Jovi was working late at the Bellwright security offices. They'd expanded significantly. What started as a division of Merrick Innovations had become its own entity, funded by both Thaddeus's investment and a coalition of foundations dedicated to protecting researchers and activists. They now employed 47 people. They'd provided free security systems to 312 organizations in 17 countries. And they'd become known as the gold standard in ethical technology. Jovi was reviewing applications for their grant program, which funded security infrastructure for journalists in dangerous regions. She was tired, ready to go home to Thaddeus and the brownstone they'd bought in Capitol Hill. But one application caught her eye. A reporter in Eastern Europe requesting encryption systems to protect sources investigating government corruption. The reporter's name was Dmitry Kovac, and attached to his application was a technical assessment of his current security needs. An assessment that used terminology Jovi recognized immediately. Bellwright architecture, but not the public version they'd released. This was using advanced techniques from her father's original classified research. Research that should have been locked away in government databases. Jovi's blood went cold. She pulled up the application details, cross-referenced the technical language, traced the digital signatures embedded in the document, and found something impossible. Someone with high-level security clearance had accessed Silas Bellwright's sealed research files 3 weeks ago, downloaded them, and was now using them to build systems for clients around the world. This wasn't just theft. This was a security breach at the highest levels of government, and it meant that somewhere, someone with power and access was doing exactly what Cordelia had done, stealing brilliant work and using it for their own purposes. Jovi called Thaddeus immediately. He was home, probably reading or working on his own projects. He answered on the first ring. "I need you to come to the office. Now." "What's wrong?" His voice shifted instantly to alert. "Someone's accessing my father's classified research, someone inside the government. And Thaddeus, if they're stealing his work, they might be setting him up again. We have to move fast." "I'm on my way." 30 minutes later, they were both in the office, pulling up files and tracing digital footprints. Jovi's fingers flew across her keyboard. Thaddeus made calls to contacts in the intelligence community, and slowly, a picture emerged. Someone in the NSA had been selling access to classified research for the past 8 months. Multiple scientists' work had been compromised. But Silas Bellwright's research, because of its quantum encryption applications, was the crown jewel. "We need to tell my father." Jovi's voice was tight. "He deserves to know." "Agreed. But first, we document everything. We build an airtight case. We make sure whoever is doing this can't wiggle out of it." Thaddeus was already compiling evidence. "This time, we don't just expose them. We make sure they can never hurt anyone again." They worked through the night. By morning, they had names, a mid-level NSA administrator named Gerald Fisk, who'd been systematically selling research access to private contractors for profit. He'd made over $2 million, compromised the work of dozens of scientists, and created security vulnerabilities that could take years to fix. Jovi and Thaddeus didn't go through normal channels. They'd learned that lesson. Instead, they contacted a journalist they trusted, provided all the evidence, and coordinated a simultaneous release to multiple media outlets and oversight committees. By noon, the story was everywhere. By evening, Gerald Fisk was in custody. Silas sat in their living room that night, watching the news coverage with an expression Jovi couldn't quite read. When the story finished, he turned to his daughter. "You protected me. Again. Always, Dad. Always." Silas smiled, but it was sad. "I thought once we cleared my name, once Cordelia was in prison, we'd be done, that we could just live and work and be happy. But this doesn't end, does it? Someone will always try to steal what we build." "Probably." Jovi sat beside him. "But we keep fighting anyway. Because the alternative is letting them win, letting fear silence us, and I'm done being silent." "So am I." Silas put his arm around his daughter. "So am I." Over the following months, the scandal grew. Gerald Fisk's arrest led to a full audit of classified research access protocols. Reforms were implemented, security was tightened, and Silas Bellwright's work was finally, definitively, protected in a way it should have been all along. But the real victory wasn't systematic, it was personal. Silas started teaching again. Not at a university, but through Bellwright Security, training the next generation of ethical engineers. He taught them technical skills, yes, but more importantly, he taught them values. How to build technology that protects instead of exploits. How to use brilliance for good. How to choose integrity, even when corruption is easier. Jovi watched her father come fully alive again. Teaching was his calling. Watching students' faces light up when they understood a concept. Mentoring young people who reminded him why he'd become a scientist in the first place. This healed him in ways that exoneration alone never could. And Thaddeus, for his part, continued transforming Merrick innovations. He implemented radical transparency policies, created employee ownership programs so that the people building the company shared in its success, redirected significant profits to social impact initiatives. The company became known not just for innovation, but for ethics, for proving that you could be wildly successful without sacrificing your soul. 2 years after their wedding, Jovi discovered she was pregnant. She told Thaddeus on a quiet Sunday morning, just the two of them having coffee in their kitchen. He cried. She cried. They held each other and marveled at the idea that they were going to create a life together. A child who would grow up knowing that both their parents had fought for justice, that brilliance and kindness weren't opposites. That love was the most revolutionary act of all. When their daughter was born, they named her Lyra Bellwright Cross, a name that honored family and future both. Silas held his granddaughter with tears streaming down his face, and Jovi watched her father hold her daughter and felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. "This is what they tried to take from us," Silas whispered to baby Lyra. "This. Family. Future. Hope. But we didn't let them. We fought back. And now you're here. Proof that love wins. That justice matters. That good people can change the world." Lyra grew up in a house full of books and equations and laughter. She learned to code before she learned to read. She asked questions that made adults think. And she grew up knowing that her mother had been invisible once and chose to be seen. That her father had everything and learned that nothing mattered without love. That her grandfather had been imprisoned for someone else's crime and came out more committed to truth than ever. This is the legacy they built. Not a company or a fortune or fame, a family dedicated to using their gifts to protect people, to see the overlooked, to give voice to the silenced, to prove that one person's courage can ripple outward and change everything. Years later, when Lyra was 10, she asked her mother, "What's the most important thing you ever did?" Jovi thought about that night in Thaddeus's office. About fixing the code in 4 minutes. About exposing Cordelia. About freeing her father. About building Bellwright Security. About all the measurable achievements. But what she said was this: "The most important thing I ever did was choose to be brave when it would have been easier to stay hidden. Because that choice changed everything. It gave me your father. It freed your grandfather. It let me build something that matters. And most importantly, it gave me you." "Will I have to be brave too?" Lyra asked. "Probably. The world isn't always kind to people who see things differently, who think deeply, who ask hard questions. But here's what I know. You come from a long line of people who chose courage over comfort. And when you're ready, when life asks you to step into the light even though it's scary, you'll have us, all of us, reminding you that you were born to shine. This isn't just entertainment. It's a reminder that your gifts matter, that the people we overlook might be the ones who save us, that courage is contagious, and love is revolutionary, and one choice, one moment of bravery can change not just your life, but the lives of everyone you touch. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, with the person hiding their brilliance, with anyone who's ever felt invisible. Tag them, comment, tell them their voice counts. Subscribe to Cedar Drama, because I'm going to keep telling stories that remind us who we can be when we stop accepting invisibility and start demanding to be seen. This story started with a billionaire and a cleaner. It ends with a family built on courage, a company built on ethics, and a legacy built on the simple truth that when we see each other, really see each other, everything changes. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for caring about stories that matter. Now go be brave. The world is waiting to see you.